The morning of my 70th birthday was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of stillness that presses against your chest and makes you question if you're still breathing. I woke up in my old house on Maple Street. The one I'd lived in for 40 years. The one where I raised my 3 children, buried 2 dogs, and outlived my husband, Richard. The sunlight slipped through the curtains, casting thin golden lines across the hardwood floor. And I lay there, waiting for something to happen. A phone call, a knock at the door, a text message, anything to signal that today was special, that I was still here, still their mother, still the woman who'd given everything for them. But the phone didn't ring. The doorbell stayed silent. The silence grew heavier as the hours ticked by. And by noon, I knew. They'd forgotten. My children Anna, Michael, and Claire had forgotten my 70th birthday. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the coffee mug Richard gave me on our 25th anniversary. The one with forever scrawled in looping cursive. My hands trembled as I traced the letters, the ceramic cold against my fingertips. I'd spent decades pouring my soul into this family. I worked 2 jobs when Richard got sick, paid for Anna's art school, Michael's law degree, Claire's wedding. I was the one who stayed up late sewing costumes for school plays, the one who drove them to soccer practice, the one who held them when their hearts broke. And now, 70, when I thought I'd earned a moment of their attention, they'd left me with nothing but an empty house and a ticking clock. The anger came slowly, like a tide creeping up the shore. It wasn't just about the birthday. It was the years of being taken for granted, of being the one they called when they needed money or advice but never when they just wanted to talk. Anna, my eldest, was always too busy with her gallery openings. Her life a whirlwind of champagne and pretentious artists. Michael, the middle child, was consumed by his law firm, his ambition a wall I couldn't scale. And Claire, my baby, had her perfect husband and her perfect twins. Her life so full she barely had time to send a text. I'd given them everything, and they couldn't even remember the day I was born. I stood up, my knees creaking, and walked to the mirror in the hallway. My reflection stared back, gray hair pulled into a neat bun, lines etched deep around my eyes, a face that had seen too much loss and too little gratitude. But there was something else in those eyes, something I hadn't seen in years: fire. I wasn't going to sit here and fade away. If they didn't want to celebrate me, I'd celebrate myself. I spent my life saving, scrimping, sacrificing for them. Richard's life insurance, my careful investments. The money I'd tucked away for their future was a small fortune, sitting in the bank, waiting. And I decided, right then, that it wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. I called my lawyer, Margaret, a sharp woman who'd known me since Richard's funeral. I want to rewrite my will, I said, my voice steady for the first time that day. I'm spending it all, every cent, and I want it done today. Margaret didn't argue. She knew better. By the end of the call, we'd set the wheels in motion. I hung up and felt a rush, like I'd just taken my first breath in years. I wasn't just going to spend the money, I was going to live. I booked a first-class ticket to Paris, a city I'd dreamed of since I was a girl. I reserved a suite at the Ritz, ordered a custom wardrobe from a designer I'd only read about in magazines. I bought a car, a sleek red convertible that made my heart race just looking at it. And I didn't stop there. I signed up for art classes, booked a cruise through the Mediterranean, donated to charities I'd always admired. Every dollar I spent was a declaration. I am still here. I am still alive. But the anger didn't fade. It grew, twisting into something darker. Something that whispered in the back of my mind as I planned my new life. They didn't just forget my birthday, they forgot me. And that betrayal deserved an answer. I didn't want to hurt them. Not really. But I wanted them to feel what I felt. To understand the weight of being invisible. So I came up with the idea of the envelopes. One for each of them. To be delivered after I was gone. Not yet. Of course, I had too much living to dope it when the time came. They'd open those envelopes and see what their neglect had cost them. I spent the rest of the day making arrangements. I called a jeweler and ordered a necklace. A sapphire pendant I'd wear in Paris. I booked a private chef for a dinner party I'd host when I returned. Not for my children, but for the friends who'd stuck by me. The ones who'd remembered my birthday with cards and calls. The house felt alive again, buzzing with my plans, my defiance. But as night fell, a small part of me wavered. I sat on the porch, the air cool against my skin, and wondered if I was being too harsh. They were my children, after all. Flawed, selfish, distracted. But mine. I pushed the thought away. They'd made their choice. And now I was making mine. The next morning, I packed a suitcase and drove to the airport. The red convertible gleamed in the parking lot. A symbol of my rebellion. I boarded the plane, settled into my first-class seat, and sipped champagne as the world fell away below me. Paris was waiting. And so was the life I'd denied myself for too long. But as the plane climbed higher, I couldn't shake the image of those envelopes, waiting in my lawyer's safe. One for Anna, one for Michael, one for Claire. Each one a key to a truth they weren't ready to face. Paris was everything I'd imagined and more. The city sparkled under a September sky. The Seine reflecting the golden light of street lamps as I wandered its streets. A stranger in a place that felt like home. I wore the sapphire necklace, its weight a reminder of my newfound freedom. I sat in cafes, sketching the Eiffel Tower in my art class notebook. My hands unsteady but eager. I dined alone at candlelit restaurants, savoring dishes I couldn't pronounce. Each bite a small victory. For the first time in decades, I wasn't a mother, a widow. A caretaker I was Eleanor. A woman with dreams and desires. A woman who mattered. But even in Paris, the anger lingered. A shadow that followed me through the Louvre's halls and along the Champs-Élysées. I catch myself wondering what my children were doing. If they'd even noticed I was gone. I'd been in Paris for a week when Anna called. Her voice crackled through the phone. Bright and oblivious. Mom, where are you? I tried the house. But you weren't there. I leaned against the balcony of my suite at the Ritz. The city sprawling below me. And felt a pang of guilt. Quickly smothered by resentment. I'm in Paris, I said. My tone clipped. There was a pause. Then a laugh. As if I'd told a joke. Paris. What are you doing there? I wanted to scream. To tell her it was my 70th birthday. That she'd forgotten. That they all had. But I didn't. I said. Living. And hung up. The phone buzzed again. But I ignored it. Let her wonder. Let them all wonder. The days blurred into weeks. I took a train to Florence, then a ferry to Santorini, where I watched sunsets that painted the sky in shades of fire. I wrote letters to Richard, not to send, but to pour out the ache in my heart. I told him about the children, how they'd grown into strangers, how I'd failed to teach them gratitude. I told him about the envelopes, my secret plan, and wondered if he'd approve. He'd always been the softer one, the one who forgave too easily. Maybe he'd tell me to let it go, but I couldn't. Not yet. Back in Paris, I met a man named Julian at an art gallery. He was in his 50s, a painter with silver hair and kind eyes, and he spoke to me like I was someone worth knowing. We talked for hours about art, loss, the weight of time. He didn't know about my children or my fortune, and I liked it that way. For once, I wasn't defined by what I'd given to others. But when he asked about my family, I hesitated. "They're busy," I said, and changed the subject. That night, alone in my suite, I cried for the first time since my birthday. Not for myself, but for the family we used to be. The one that laughed around the dinner table. The one that felt unbreakable. The envelopes were never far from my mind. I'd sketched out their contents in a notebook, hidden in my suitcase. Each one was different, tailored to Anna, Michael, and Claire, a mirror to their flaws, their betrayals. Anna's would confront her selfishness, her obsession with status over family. Michael's would expose his arrogance, his belief that his success excused his neglect. Claire's would be the hardest, because she was my youngest, the one I'd always spoiled. Hers would speak to her absence, her choice to prioritize her new family over the one that raised her. But the envelopes weren't just accusations, they were questions, challenges, a chance for them to see themselves and change. Or so I told myself. I returned home after 3 months, my heart fuller but heavier. The house on Maple Street felt smaller, as if it had shrunk in my absence. I unpacked my suitcase, my new clothes and sketches a testament to the life I'd claimed. But the silence was back, and with it, the realization that my children hadn't changed. Anna sent a text, asking if I was back and suggesting lunch sometime soon. Michael left a voicemail. His voice rushed, saying he'd stop by when work slowed down. Claire sent a photo of the twins. No mention of my trip or my birthday. I sat at the kitchen table, the forever mug in my hands, and felt the anger flare again. They hadn't learned. They hadn't even tried. I called Margaret and finalized the envelopes. "Make sure they get them after I'm gone," I said. "And don't let them know what's inside until then." She asked if I was sure, her voice gentle but probing. I spent my fortune, lived my dreams. But this was my legacy. Not the money, not the house, but the truth. The envelopes would be my final word, my way of holding them accountable. As I hung up, I felt a strange calm. I'd reclaimed my life, and now I'd reclaim my voice. The months after my return were a whirlwind of purpose. I threw myself into my new life, hosting dinner parties for friends, taking pottery classes, volunteering at a local shelter. The house on Maple Street buzzed with energy. But it wasn't the same. It wasn't the family I'd once known. My children drifted in and out, their visits brief and perfunctory. Anna came by with a bottle of wine, her smile too bright, her eyes darting to her phone. Michael stopped by after a court case, his suit crisp, his words clipped. Claire brought the twins once, and I held them close, their laughter a fleeting bomb. But none of them asked about Paris, about the convertible, about the woman I was becoming. They saw the same old mom, reliable, unchanging, invisible. The envelopes haunted me. I'd lie awake at night, imagining their faces when they opened them. Would they cry? Would they rage? Would they finally understand? I'd written the letters in a fit of clarity, each word a blade honed by years of unspoken hurt. But as the months passed, doubt crept in. Was I punishing them too harshly? Was I letting my anger define me? I pushed the thoughts away, focusing on the life I was building. I bought a small cabin in the mountains, a place to escape when the city felt too heavy. I planted a garden, my hands deep in the soil, coaxing life from the earth. I was living, truly living, but the envelopes were a shadow I couldn't shake. One evening, Anna showed up unannounced. She stood in the doorway, her coat damp from the rain, her face pale. "Mom, we need to talk," she said. I poured her tea, my hands steady despite the knot in my stomach. She sat across from me, twisting her wedding ring, and told me about her gallery. It was failing. The investors had pulled out. The critics had turned on her. She needed money, a loan, just to get through the next few months. I listened, my heart torn between pity and fury. She hadn't come to see me, to apologize, to connect come for my wallet. "I don't have it," I said, my voice calm but cold. "I spent it all." Her eyes widened, disbelieving. "What do you mean? Spent it? You had millions, Mom." I shrugged, sipping my tea. "I lived. You should try it." She left in a huff, her heels clicking on the hardwood. I sat there, the silence deafening, and wondered if I'd been too cruel. But the truth was, I didn't have the money anymore. I'd given it to myself, to charities, to the life I deserved. And yet, her desperation lingered in my mind, a crack in my resolve. I pulled out my notebook, the one with the envelope drafts, and reread Anna's letter. It was sharp, accusing, a mirror to her selfishness. But maybe it was too much. Maybe I needed to offer her a way back, a chance to change. I tore out the page and started again, my pen moving slowly, searching for words that balanced justice with mercy. The next week, Michael called. He was in town for a conference and wanted to meet for dinner. I agreed, choosing a quiet restaurant where we could talk. He looked tired, his eyes shadowed, his tie loosened. He talked about work, about cases he'd won, but there was a hollowness to his voice. I asked about his life, his dreams, the things he never shared. He brushed me off, saying he was fine, just busy. I wanted to shake him, to tell him I wasn't just his mother. I was a person, someone who'd been hurt by his absence. But I didn't. I paid the bill and drove home, the red convertible purring under my hands. That night, I rewrote his envelope, too, softening the edges, adding a question, "What kind of man do you want to be?" Claire's visit came last. She brought the twins, and we spent the day baking cookies, their small hands sticky with dough. For a moment, felt like the old days, when love was simple and pure. But when the twins were asleep, Claire's mask slipped. She was tired, she said, overwhelmed by motherhood, by her husband's long hours. She needed me, but not as a Mathira's a babysitter, a bank, a solution. I held her hand, my heart aching, but I didn't offer money. I offered time, love, myself. She didn't want it. When she left, I rewrote her envelope, my tears smudging the ink. I wanted her to see her absence, but also the door I was leaving open. The envelopes were changing, just as I was. They weren't just about revenge anymore, they were about truth, about redemption, about hoping my children could find their way back to me. But I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. I needed them to feel the weight of their choices, just as I'd felt the weight of their neglect. The seasons changed, and so did I. Winter brought snow to Maple Street, blanketing the house in a quiet that felt both peaceful and lonely. I spent my days painting, my canvases filled with bold colors and jagged lines, each stroke a release of the anger I'd carried for so long. My friends noticed the change in Mimi. Laughter was louder, my eyes brighter. But the envelopes remained, locked in Margaret's safe, a secret I couldn't share. They were my insurance, my way of ensuring my children would face the truth, even if I wasn't there to see it. One afternoon, as I pruned my garden, a car pulled into the driveway. It was Michael, unannounced, his face drawn. He didn't come for money or favor, she came to apologize. He sat on the porch, his hands clasped, and told me he'd been thinking about our dinner, about how distant he'd become. "I've been a lousy son," he said, his voice breaking. "I got caught up in work, in proving myself. I forgot what matters." I listened, my heart caught between hope and skepticism. Was this genuine, or was it another performance? I didn't know, but I let him talk, let him spill his regrets. When he left, I felt a crack in the wall I'd built around my heart. Anna's apology came next, in a letter, of all things. It arrived in a cream envelope, her handwriting shaky. She wrote about her gallery, her failures, how she'd pushed me away because she was ashamed. "I thought you'd always be there," she wrote, "and I took you for granted." I read it by the fireplace, the flames casting shadows on the walls. I wanted to believe her, but the hurt was still raw. I wrote back, a short note, telling her I loved her but needed time. I didn't mention the envelopes, but they loomed in my mind, a reminder of the work she still had to do. Claire was the hardest. She didn't apologize. Not directly. She invited me to the twins' birthday party, a lavish affair at her suburban home. I went, dressed in a new silk dress, the sapphire necklace gleaming at my throat. The party was loud, chaotic, filled with children and parents I didn't know. Claire was distracted, playing the perfect hostess, but I saw the strain in her eyes. When I caught her alone, I asked if she was happy. She brushed it off, saying she was fine, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. I left early, my heart heavy. Her envelope was the one I dreaded most. because it felt like a betrayal of the bond we'd once shared. As spring approached, I began to question the envelopes. They'd started as a weapon, a way to strike back at the children who'd hurt me. But now, with Michael's apology and Anna's letter, I wondered if I was holding on to anger that no longer served me. I drove to the cabin, seeking clarity. The mountains were quiet, the air sharp with pine. I sat by the lake, my notebook open, and read the letters again. They were honest, yes, but they were also cruel, designed to wound as much as to teach. I thought of Richard, of his gentle heart, and wondered what he'd say. "They're still your children," he'd tell me. "They're still ours." I rewrote the envelopes again, this time with less venom. Anna's letter became a reflection on her potential, a call to find her passion again. Michael's was a challenge to balance ambition with love. Claire's was a plea to slow down, to see the family she still had. I added something new to each one, a memory, a moment from their childhood when we were happy, when we were whole. I wanted them to remember, not just their mistakes, but the love we'd shared. When I returned to the city, I called Margaret and updated the will. The envelopes were still there, but they were different now. Less about revenge and more about redemption. I wasn't ready to forgive completely. Some wounds were too deep, but I was opening a door, giving them a chance to walk through. I spent my days living, painting, gardening, but the weight of the envelopes was lighter now. They were no longer a punishment, but a hope, a belief that my children could change. As summer bloomed, I planned a trip to Japan, another dream I'd buried long ago. I packed my suitcase, my heart lighter but still uncertain. The envelopes were my final act, my way of speaking when I was gone. But for now, I was here, alive, and I wasn't done living. I drove to the airport, the red convertible roaring, and smiled. I was Eleanor, and I was enough. Japan was a revelation, a tapestry of cherry blossoms and ancient temples, of quiet moments that felt like prayers. I walked through Kyoto's bamboo forests, my footsteps soft on the earth, and felt a peace I hadn't known since Richard's death. I was 70, but I felt young, alive, as if the world was opening up to me for the first time. Yet, even in the serenity of a tea ceremony, my thoughts drifted to my children, to the envelopes, to the legacy I was leaving behind. I wondered if they'd ever understand, if they'd ever see me as more than their mother, as a woman who'd fought to reclaim herself. Back home, the seasons turned again, and with them came a shift in my children. Michael started calling regularly, not just to check in, but to talk, to share pieces of his life he'd kept hidden. He told me about a case he'd lost, how it humbled him, made him question his priorities. I listened, my heart softening, but I didn't let him off the hook. "I'm proud of you," I said, "but I need more than phone calls." He promised to try, and for the first time, I believed him. Anna invited me to her new gallery opening, a smaller, humbler affair. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'm sorry, Mom." I held her, tears in my eyes, but I didn't say it was okay. Not yet. Claire was still distant, caught in her perfect life, but she started sending letters, short notes about the twins, about her fears. One evening, she called, her voice trembling. I miss you, she said. I miss us. I told her about Paris, about the convertible, about the life I'd built. She listened, and for the first time, I felt seen. I invited her to the cabin. Just her and the twins. No distractions. She agreed. And when they came, we spent a weekend laughing, fishing, baking. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The envelopes were still in Margaret's safe, but they felt less urgent now. I'd rewritten them so many times, each version softer, more hopeful. They weren't just about my pain anymore, they were about my love. My belief in my children's ability to grow. But I wasn't ready to destroy them. They were still my insurance. My way of ensuring the truth would outlast me. I spent my days painting, gardening, living. But the envelopes were a quiet presence. A reminder of the work still left to do. One night, I had a dream about Richard. He was young again, standing in our old backyard, his smile warm. You're doing good, Ellie, he said. But don't hold on too tight. I woke up crying, his voice echoing in my mind. I drove to the cabin, needing space to think. The lake was still, the stars bright above. I pulled out my notebook and read the envelopes again. They were better, kinder, but they still felt like a weapon, a way to control the narrative even after I was gone. I wondered if I was holding onto the past, refusing to let go of the hurt. I called Margaret the next morning. I want to see the envelopes, I said. She brought them to the cabin, her eyes curious but kind. I sat by the lake, the 3 envelopes in my lap, each one sealed, each one a piece of my heart. I opened Anna's first. The words were raw, honest, but they weren't cruel anymore. They were a challenge, a call to be better. Michael's was the same, a mirror to his ambition but also a reminder of his heart. Claire's was the hardest, because it was filled with love, with memories of her as a child, with hope for her future. I sealed them again, my hands trembling, and gave them back to Margaret. Keep them safe, I said. But I might want to change them again. As autumn painted the mountains red and gold, I felt a shift in myself. I was still angry, still hurt, but I was also hopeful. My children were trying, slowly, imperfectly, to come back to me. I wasn't ready to forgive completely, but I was ready to let them try. I planned another trip, this time to Iceland, to see the northern lights. I wanted to stand under that sky, to feel the vastness of the world, to know I was part of it. The envelopes were still there, but they were no longer the center of my story. Iceland was a land of fire and ice, a place where the earth felt alive, breathing beneath my feet. I stood under the northern lights, their colors dancing across the sky, and felt small but infinite. I was 71 now, my life a canvas I was still painting, each stroke bolder than the last. I traveled alone, but I wasn't lonely. I carried Richard's memory, my friend's laughter, the hope of my children's redemption. The envelopes were still in Margaret's safe, but they felt distant, like a chapter I'd written but wasn't ready to close. When I returned, I found a letter from Anna waiting. She'd sold her gallery, taken a teaching job at a community college. It's not glamorous, she wrote, but it feels right. She asked me to visit, to see her new life. I went, and for the first time, I saw my daughter, not the artist or the socialite, but the woman she was becoming. We talked for hours, about art, about loss, about the years we'd let slip away. She didn't ask for money or favor, she asked for me. I held her hand, my heart full, and felt the first threads of forgiveness weave through me. Michael invited me to his firm's charity gala, a rare night off from his endless cases. He introduced me to his colleagues, his voice proud, not performative. "This is my mom," he said, and I saw the boy I'd raised, the one who'd once clung to me during thunderstorms. We danced, my steps unsteady but joyful, and he whispered, "I'm trying, Mom. I'm really trying." I nodded, tears in my eyes, and told him to keep going. He was, and so was I. Claire's change was slower, more fragile. She invited me to dinner, just the two of us. No twins, no husband. We sat in a quiet restaurant, the air heavy with unspoken words. She told me about her marriage, how it was cracking under the weight of perfection. "I thought I had to be everything," she said. "I forgot how to be your daughter." I listened, my heart aching, and told her about Paris, about the envelopes, not their contents, but their existence. Her eyes widened, but she didn't press. "I want to do better," she said. I believed her, but I needed more than words. The envelopes were still there, a quiet presence in my mind. I drove to the cabin, needing clarity. The lake was frozen, the air sharp. I sat by the fire, my notebook open, and thought about Richard. He'd always believed in second chances, in the power of love to heal. I wondered if I was strong enough to let go, to trust my children without the safety net of those letters. I called Margaret and asked her to bring the envelopes again. She arrived, her face gentle but curious. I opened them, one by one, and read the words I'd written. They were good, honest, but they still carried the weight of my pain. I wanted them to be more, to be a bridge, not a wall. I spent the night rewriting, my pen moving slowly, deliberately. Anna's letter was now a celebration of her resilience, a call to keep teaching, to keep growing. Michael's was a reminder of his heart, a challenge to lead with kindness. Claire's was a love letter, a plea to find herself again. Each one ended with a memory, a moment of joy we'd shared, a reminder of who we were. I sealed them, my hands steady, and gave them to Margaret. "One more change," I said. "Maybe the last." Spring brought warmth to Maple Street, and with it, a sense of renewal. I invited my children to the cabin, all three of them, for a weekend. It was the first time we'd been together in years. No distractions, no excuses. We cooked, laughed, argued, cried. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. I saw glimpses of the family we used to be, and the family we could become. I didn't tell them about the envelopes, but I felt their weight lifting, their purpose shifting. They weren't about revenge anymore, they were about love, about hope, about redemption. As we sat by the lake, the stars above us, I felt Richard's presence, his smile in the breeze. I was still Eleanor, still living, still fighting. The envelopes were my safety net, but I was starting to believe I didn't need them. My children were trying, and so was I. We weren't there yet, but we were moving, together, toward something better. The cabin weekend marked a turning point, a fragile bridge between the past and the future. My children left with promises to stay connected, to be better, and for the first time, I felt they meant it. Anna called weekly, sharing stories of her students, her voice lighter. Michael took a sabbatical, spending time with me, helping in the garden, his hands unused to soil but eager. Claire started therapy, unraveling the knots of her perfect life, and invited me to join her for a session. I went, and we cried together, rebuilding what we'd lost. But the envelopes remained, a secret I carried, a reminder of the hurt that still lingered. I turned 72, and this time, they remembered. Anna painted me a portrait, her brushstrokes bold and tender. Michael organized a quiet dinner, just the four of us, his laughter warm. Claire baked a cake, her twins decorating it with messy frosting. We sat around the table, the forever mug in my hands, and I felt a warmth I hadn't known in years. But even in that joy, I couldn't forget the envelopes. They were my truth, my legacy, and I wasn't ready to let them go. I traveled again, this time to New Zealand, hiking trails that tested my body but freed my soul. I wrote to Richard, my letters a ritual now, telling him about our children, about the hope I felt. I wondered if he'd be proud, if he'd think I'd done enough. I wasn't sure. The envelopes were still there, a weight I couldn't fully release. I returned home, my heart full but restless, and called Margaret. I need to see them again, I said. She brought them to the house, her eyes knowing. I sat in the garden, the envelopes in my lap, and read them one last time. Anna's letter was a love song to her spirit, a call to keep teaching, to keep loving. Michael's was a challenge to live with purpose, to remember his roots. Claire's was a mirror, reflecting her strength, her vulnerability, her heart. Each one ended with a memory, a moment of joy, a reminder of who we were. They were beautiful, but they felt final, like a door closing. I realized I didn't want that not yet. I wanted my children to know the truth now, not after I was gone. I invited them to the house, one by one. I started with Anna. I handed her the envelope, my hands trembling. "Read it," I said. She opened it, her eyes scanning the words, tears falling. "Mom," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." I held her, my own tears falling, and told her I loved her, that I believed in her. Michael was next. He read his letter in silence, his jaw tight, then hugged me, his voice thick. "I'll do better," he said. Claire was last. She cried before she even opened it, her hands shaking. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't know how much I hurt you." We sat together, the letter between us, and talked, really talked, for the first time in years. The envelopes were no longer a secret. They were a bridge, a way to start again. I felt lighter, as if I'd shed a skin I'd outgrown. I didn't need to hold on to the anger anymore. I had my children. Imperfect but trying. And that was enough. I planned another trip. To Morocco. To wander the markets and feel the sun on my face. I was 72. But I was alive. And I wasn't done. The envelopes had served their purpose. Not as a weapon, but as a mirror, reflecting the love we'd lost and found again. As summer faded, I sat on the porch, the forever mug warm in my hands. I thought of Richard, of the life we'd built, of the children we'd raised. I thought of the envelopes, now shared, now understood. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was Eleanor, mother, woman, survivor, and I was enough. Morocco was a kaleidoscope of color and sound, a place where I felt both lost and found. I wandered the souks of Marrakesh, my fingers brushing against silks and spices, my heart open to the world. I was 72, but I felt timeless, as if the years had only deepened my capacity for wonder. My children were part of my life again, their efforts imperfect but real. Anna sent photos of her students' art. Michael called to share his plans to start a pro bono clinic. Claire invited me to the twin school plays. We were rebuilding, slowly, carefully, and the envelopes had been the key, not to revenge, but to redemption. I returned to Maple Street, the house no longer silent but alive with memories and new beginnings. I painted, gardened, laughed with friends. But I also spent time with my children, listening to their stories, sharing mine. The envelopes had opened a door, and we were walking through it together. But there was one last thing I needed to do. I called Margaret and asked her to destroy the copies in her safe. They've served their purpose, I said. She smiled, her eyes warm, and agreed. The envelopes were no longer a secret, no longer a weapon. They were a moment in time, turning point, and we'd moved beyond them. One evening, I invited my children to the cabin. We sat by the lake, the stars bright above, and I told them about my 70th birthday, about the pain of their neglect, about the fortune I'd spent. They listened, their faces shadowed but open. Anna spoke first, her voice soft. We failed you, Mom. But we're here now. Michael nodded, his hand on mine. We're not going anywhere. Claire cried, her twins asleep in her lap. I love you, she said. I always have. I believed them, not because they were perfect, but because they were trying. We spent the weekend together, cooking, laughing, remembering. I showed them my paintings, my sketches from Paris, my letters to Richard. They shared their own stories, their fears, their hopes. It wasn't the family we'd been, but it was the family we were becoming. I felt Richard's presence, his smile in the breeze, and knew he'd be proud. We'd found our way back, not to the past, but to something new. As I drove home, the red convertible purring, I thought about the envelopes, about the woman I'd been when I wrote them. I'd been angry, hurt, invisible. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I was Eleanor, mother, artist, dreamer. I'd spent my fortune on myself, not out of selfishness, but out of survival. And in doing so, I found my voice, my strength, my family. The envelopes had been my rebellion, my way of demanding to be seen. But they'd also been my gift, a way to show my children who they could be. I turned 73, and we celebrated together, not with grand gestures, but with love. Anna painted me a mural. Michael cooked. Claire brought the twins. We sat around the table, the forever mug in my hands, and I felt whole. The envelopes were gone, but their truth remained. We were flawed, but we were family. I planned another trip. To Brazil. To dance in the streets of Rio. I was 73, but I was alive, and I wasn't done. I spent my fortune, but I'd gained something greater myself. My children. Our future. As I stood on the porch, the night air cool, I looked at the stars and smiled. I was Eleanor, and I was enough.